Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, all of the people in the XRP Army world. It is a sincere honor and pleasure to be able to have a chance to get to know a gentleman named Alan Hibbard. And I watched a video that he did the other day. So everyone make sure to give a link, a like and subscribe to Alan and his efforts on YouTube. He had a great interview with Matt Hamilton the other day. And so that just inspired me to want to be able to reach out to him and see if I could have a chance to get to speak with him as well and get to know his crypto experience. And so I invited him and he graciously accepted. So I'd like to introduce everyone to Alan Hibbard.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me. Very exciting to talk to you today.
Well, I appreciate that. And Alan is in New York and it's sunny. I am in rainy North Carolina. It's been raining here consistently for seems like 72 hours. For about 72 hours, but it seems like it's been forever. So I am really ready for the rain to end and get some sunshine. So I'm envious of the weather that you're having. Now, one of the things I'd like to do, and feel free to answer if you don't want to talk about something, and you could just say, don't want to talk about that. But we just got on and had a brief introduction to each other before, and I asked you what you did, and I found that fascinating. So if you would like to repeat that for everyone and let everybody know, where you're from and what you do, I think they would find that just as interesting as I did.
Yeah, definitely. So as you mentioned, I'm in upstate New York right now, nowhere near New York City. But yeah, the weather is fantastic. And I've spent most of my career in finance and education simultaneously. I was an investment manager for a very large portfolio for several years. And I've also taught in high schools and colleges, different topics, usually in business. I also taught a blockchain workshop. And most recently, what you and I were talking about is my latest role, consulting. And my primary client is actually Mike Maloney. So I'm helping him write his second book right now. For anyone who doesn't know, Mike wrote the best-selling book on precious metals of all time, I believe, Guide to Investing in Gold and Silver. And he has a fantastic series on YouTube, Hidden Secrets of Money. He's got 10 episodes, and those have millions and millions and millions of views. And so I've been a fan of Mike's for 5 years or more. And in one of his videos, he mentioned he was apologizing to the audience because he said, I'm sorry, guys, I didn't have time to update this chart. I just wanted to get the video out. And I thought that was strange because I'm imagining that, such a successful guy has a huge team of people working for him. So right. I decided to reach out to him. I reached out to customer service at his company and said, you know what, I know how to make charts. I've taught this stuff in college, and I would love to help Mike and just, help him update charts or whatever he needs. And sure enough, he accepted. So I've been helping him on the back end for over a year now, almost a year and a half. So it's fantastic to be so close to him and hear how he thinks. And he and I spend hours on the phone, multiple times a week. So it's really amazing to be so close to him and hear his thoughts.
That's absolutely fascinating. And one of the things that I really enjoyed when I have watched his videos is that he seems to be very open to crypto. There are a lot of gold, and I guess they refer to them, and I don't see it as a bad way of saying it, but the gold and silver bugs, that they are just stuck on just precious metals and everything else is bad. But I've seen that he has been open-minded to crypto, blockchain and crypto, and I really respect that a great deal. And I really enjoy watching and trying to learn more about money and about blockchain from his perspective. But again, I was very, very happy to see that it seemed like that he was, pro blockchain and crypto.
Yeah, definitely he is. And it's really nice, hearing his views on things and almost encouraging him to see other perspectives. If he has an opinion about something, I can send him articles and say, here's another perspective you might want to consider. And he is open-minded, like you say. And there have been several times where he admits, he'll actually say, you know what, I was wrong. He'll use those words, and it's really powerful. And if he comes across a better perspective or one that he thinks is more accurate or more valid, he will change his mind. I give him a lot of credit for that.
Well, do you feel like that yourself and Mike's opinion as well, do you feel like that we are coming to a come to Jesus moment with the fiat money system in the world?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And I also think that Mike would say yes as well. What's going on now in the fiat world is unsustainable. It's just a question of how long they can sustain it. I think if you asked me or Mike or a lot of other analysts 10 years ago, we would have been surprised that it could last this long. So we may continue to be surprised at how much longer it will last into the future. So that's a big thing. Like, it feels to me like it's going to fall apart this year or next year or maybe the year after. But I don't want to, fool myself yet again and be surprised if it's another 10, 20, 30 years down the road that the shenanigans continue. But it's very possible.
Well, I like most everybody, thoroughly enjoyed The Big Short.
Yep.
And when I saw that, I was shocked at it. Didn't really seem like that the people who were involved in it really understood really what was going on that well. They were just doing what they were told to do. And, I remember the guy, Steve Carell, in the restaurant with the Asian guy who was a portfolio manager, and he was asking him to describe what these derivatives actually were. And the guy, it was obvious the guy, I don't really know what it is. I'm just selling it.
Yep.
And I'm making a killing. And I watched something about 2 weeks ago that I'd never seen before. An interview with the guy named Matthew Cox. Have you ever heard of that guy?
I don't think so.
You may find that really entertaining. I think it was that Bet David guy on Valuetainment.
Oh, yep, I know him.
Yeah, he interviewed this guy, Matthew Cox, and he was a mortgage broker. And he did a lot of fraud, and mortgage fraud. And he ended up being the FBI's most wanted criminal until they caught him. And it was just unbelievable, the shenanigans that the mortgage people were doing during that 2007, 2008, 2009 time period because they could. And I don't think that what the Fed did then, they didn't make any fundamental changes at that time. They just put a Band-Aid on it with TARP, and then things just went on business as normal. And now that I'm a little bit more educated, I went to Appalachian State. I got a degree in radio and TV communications, not in economics. But in the last 2 years, I have really spent a lot of time trying to educate myself about these kinds of things. And I don't see how the fiat system can continue. If you give a central bank $10 and they can loan 10, we've maxed out. I mean, we're set up in a house of cards, and all the banks are broke. And one of the greatest things too that I feel bad that it doesn't seem like the average Joe citizen understands it at all. We didn't enter this financial crisis due to the beer cold. The Fed started repo madness September 17th, 2019, because the bank want to loan each other money. So the Fed had to step in, but that was before any of this health crisis. But I think that if you go and ask the average person out there, they think that we're in this economic situation because of the illness. And it's just, I don't know. Now, having said that, do you have an opinion of what you think if we are at the end and we do have to have a paradigm shift into something else? Do you have any idea, Alan, what you feel like that is going to be?
That is a great question. And it's really $1 million question, $1 trillion question. It's a big question. If you get it right, you make a lot of money if you can act on it, before the bankers do, before the decision makers make their decision public. Really, I see it two ways. If you look at the monetary history of the United States, it's sort of like the monetary history of any major empire throughout history, even Rome. And Mike Maloney has a video about this, so I would definitely encourage people to check it out. It is so well done. And basically the history looks something like this. An empire starts on a gold standard, sound money. Then they move to a fractional gold standard where they have, let's say it's 40% backed by gold in the case of the United States for, 20 years or whatever that window was. And then they eventually, reduce that ratio until finally there's no gold backing whatsoever. And that's called a fiat monetary system. And that's how any major fiat currency has come about. It was originally backed by gold, and then the gold backing was removed. And that's sort of the general trend. And now getting back to your question, what comes next? Well, it could be another form of packaging. It could be another definition of the dollar that still continues to be fiat, that just looks different. That is a very plausible thing, that it remains fiat, but it's packaged differently. Maybe it's an SDR that's issued by the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. And for folks who don't know, an SDR is a special drawing right. And it's just the name of, it's the name of the international currency that already exists. It's just not international currency for civilians to use. It only goes to central banks of countries. But that could change. And that SDR could be backed by gold. And then, the US dollar and other currencies could be pegged to the SDR, or the SDR could just be fiat and the dollar's pegged to the SDR, or the SDR might not be involved at all. And so it really could be anything, which is almost not a helpful answer, other than it may encourage people to do some research and come up with their own opinions, which I think is always a good thing. But the way I think about the world is that I do not need to pick a monetary system for myself that is the same as the one my country is using. There's no reason for me to have to hold my wealth in dollars just because I live in the United States. So just because, the government or the central bank is sort of dumb enough to go off the gold standard as a country, that doesn't mean I have to go off the gold standard for myself and my family. So I actually own gold. I got physical gold. And I also have digital gold, Bitcoin. And those two positions are my largest, because I consider that real money, and I consider myself a saver, actually not an investor, believe it or not. Right now, I'm just a saver. All I have is savings, and people might think that's crazy that it's gold and Bitcoin because they're both volatile, but especially Bitcoin. But that's my starting point. And, if I have 5 Bitcoins, 10 Bitcoins, whatever the number of Bitcoins, I don't care about the price in dollars every day. I just don't care. It's still the same number of Bitcoins. So if I'm measuring my wealth and how many Bitcoins do I have, it's the same number every single day. And that's what I want to get myself used to thinking. Right. And then if I ever want to invest, I think, okay, how do I turn 5 Bitcoins into 6 Bitcoins? And maybe that means moving into an altcoin, or maybe it means moving into a stock, or maybe it means moving into real estate, some investment that will increase the number of Bitcoins I have ultimately when I return to Bitcoins. Or when I return to ounces of gold. So I know you asked about the monetary system, and I really don't know. But I put myself on sound money as a starting point. And then from there, if I can find attractive investments, I go into that. But I do not consider the US dollar a very attractive investment. So I don't have any wealth in dollars. I just think it's kind of crazy. So.
Well, one of the theories in the XRP world is something called the pre-allocation theory. Have you ever heard of that before, Alan?
Does that have to do with pre-mining, or is that something else?
No. Okay, so the IMF. If I'm correct, there are 181 countries that are members of the IMF.
Sounds about right.
Okay. Ripple holds I think, let's say, I mean, give or take a little, they own 55 billion XRP in escrow. And one of the theories called the pre-allocation theory that is in the XRP community is that the IMF would be gifted the escrowed XRP as an ESDR, a digital SDR, and then they allocate it out to the 181 IMF members, and then they set the price of each one of the XRP that they gave to these countries, and then we're all out of debt.
Okay.
Now
sounds like magic.
in the last 3 years, do you recall President Trump, Christine Lagarde, Mark Carney, who used to be the president of the Bank of England, governor of the Bank of England? You remember all of them saying level the playing field?
Yep.
Well, one way that if they're all behind the scenes, all organizing the way that they're going to reset our financial system and they're going to level the playing field, that's one way that it could be done. And again, and one of the things that people do not have a real good understanding of what Ripple and XRP are. Ripple was a startup that began in 2012 in San Francisco, and they provide software called RippleNet to banks. And that software is a potential used with a system to replace SWIFT. Mm-hmm. All right, SWIFT is 40-year-old technology. There are 3 problems with SWIFT. Number one, it's slow, right? There's a 4-day settlement, actually 4 problems. The banks using it, the participating banks, central banks that are using it, Alan, had to have pre-funded accounts called Nostro Vostro accounts. That ties up a lot of dormant capital. So when we want to send money, we're going to send it, and the settlement process is usually going to take 3 to 4 days. So we've got a speed problem. We've got a problem that it creates a need for dormant capital on behalf of the banks. And then it's expensive. The transaction fees are costly. And then last, there's a 6% error rate.
It's crazy.
So if you and I were using a phone and 6 out of every 100 phone calls that we made didn't go through, I think we would probably dump Verizon and go find AT&T.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Let's go get T-Mobile. Let's do something. Okay, so our monetary global system, the plumbing of the entire global payment system, which is SWIFT, is old and lame and outdated and cost a lot and is slow. So the mission of Ripple is to replace that. Now, having said that, their digital token XRP just happens to work best with the plumbing that they created. So it can be a cross-border remittance tool within the new plumbing, the monetary system of the way that we send money. And that's the problem that David Schwartz and Chris Larson, the owners, and Arthur Brito, the creators of Ripple, that's what they started with. A problem. Slow, inefficient, old, bad tech needs to be updated. They created something also called the Interledger Protocol. Now, you're younger than me, but you can remember the beginning of the internet just as I can. Some people say, including Al Gore, that Al Gore created it. All right. Well, what really happened was there were a couple of college professor geeks that decided they wanted to communicate with each other. So they created this thing and started emailing each other, started messaging each other. Well, Alan, at that time, they did not know that there needed to be security. There was no cryptography. There was no need for it. That's why we are entertained, maybe on a daily basis, depending on if you're looking for his content, by the incredible, wonderful Mr. John McAfee.
Yeah.
Because he created a security system that lays on top of the insecure internet that Al Gore created. Yeah. And we have Norton. Okay, so that foundation of the internet is also another problem that the Ripple team is looking to replace with something called the interledger protocol. So we had .com. I mean, we had the before HTTPS, and then we added the S to try to help with some security. We added Norton. But again, the entire structure, and that was what I learned from Don Tapscott about why we need the blockchain. We need a more secure foundation of sending data to people. And the interledger protocol is what David Schwartz created, and they actually gave that, Alan, to the World Wide Web Consortium. That's a free think tank that advises the world. They're the ones that gave HTTPS to the world. And Ripple gave that technology the new, and in my opinion, what is going to be our new HTTPS, the interledger protocol, the entire foundational system of the new, more secure internet. Then they added a way to be able to send money, because right now, Brad Garlinghouse, the CEO of Ripple, said that if we wanted to send money right now from New York to California, the best way to do it is on a jet. Yeah. I mean, it's ridiculous in 2020 that we have not found a way to be able to send value, money, digitally, more secure and quicker than this. And that, again, was the original use, or the original problem that I believe that the gentleman in Ripple decided. Now, you want to have a little tin hat moment with me for a second?
Always.
Yeah, the reason that I wanted to bring this up to you is because you mentioned the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
I think you're going to kind of like this. Now, Ripple is a startup, started in 2012, right? Do you know what their valuation is today?
Ripple as a company?
Uh-huh.
I do not know.
It's over $10 billion. Not bad for a little startup that nobody knew about, right? And most people don't know, again, the company behind all of this stuff and what these guys have been doing. Now, in order to do that, they have contracts with MoneyGram as one of their biggest partnerships. And they are sending money right now as a use case from America to Mexico, Mexico to America, cheaper, faster, more secure than Western Union, which is all tied in with SWIFT. So if they can prove that we have a faster, cheaper, more secure payment option, then they just open up more corridors across the globe. All right. So do you know the most famous Roman family? And this is the tin hat moment, one of them maybe. Do you know who the Roman family, Alan, that started banking in the world?
Well, I want to say the Medici family.
You would be correct.
Okay, there you go.
And then do you know what ended up happening as the progression of the Medici family and banking? They ended up with 4 popes, right, in the family. Okay. And then what happened? The Flugers came along.
Okay.
And pushed them out.
Okay, this is new to me. Okay.
Okay, so the Medici no longer are the Holy Roman Empire are no longer behind the entire monetary system of the world because the Fluger family came in and pushed them out.
Okay.
All right, so again, we're going now maybe to a new plumbing system in the entire monetary system of the world, right? More secure, quicker, faster, right?
Yeah.
Guess who is on the board of Ripple who joined the Ripple family in 2014?
Someone Fluger.
No.
Oh, Medici?
Someone Medici.
Okay. Medici.
If you Google somebody named Klaus von Gutenberg, he is supposedly, depending on the people that like him or don't, could possibly take over when Miss Merkel steps down in Germany.
Okay.
He is in the bloodline of the Medici, and he became a Ripple board member in 2014. So if you think about it, how in the world did these guys out there in San Francisco, how did they make all of these connections with all of these government officials that they're involved in, all of the banks? They've got connections or contracts with, I believe it's over 300 banks now. One of the reasons that the crypto people don't like the XRP and Ripple project is because they feel like that it's the banker's coin. We want to be the anarchists. We want privacy. Cardano, Monero. Well, I don't think that the central banks and I don't think that the governments of the world are going to go for that. I think they want a way to be able to track every single thing that we do. So that was the first thing that Ripple did, is they began to go and talk with the regulators. And again, when you have the tin hat moment again, when you have a Medici on board who might possibly want to get their family back into banking, and then he introduces all of the Ripple team to all of the different contacts he's got all over the world, then it's easy, makes a little bit more sense how a little startup out of San Francisco could end up 10, 12 years later being a $10 billion company that hardly nobody knows anything about.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that like astronomical growth is, first of all, difficult to do, obviously, and connections are certainly very helpful. And what's interesting that you mentioned, the Nostro and Vostro accounts with all that money just parked there for all of these
capital.
Yeah. It's really just sitting there and it doesn't circulate in the economy. And my thought, because this is how I think, is that when that ultimately gets disrupted, either through, Ripple and their products or some competitor or a combination, but when it ultimately gets disrupted, where's all that capital going to go? I mean, it's going to get freed up and it's going to circulate, and that's going to cause crazy inflation. That's just where my mind goes. It's like, all right, because we've been printing money, all the central banks of the world, and, it hasn't really hit consumer prices to the magnitude of the printing, but it will eventually. And this is sort of one of the great ironies of being a disruptor. It's like that creative destruction. It's like, in order to have that better future where things are fast and cheap and streamlined, you got to go through a lot of pain. And, I think the global economy is going to go through a lot of pain, but it's necessary. It's it's necessary to heal. And that's just kind of where I was going. And I totally agree with a comment you made earlier, which is that this banking crisis has been going on before the beer crisis. It's and it's even before September. Like the repo operation started in September, but there were other problems, even earlier than that. And maybe just one other thing I'll share. Also going back to an earlier comment that you made about fractional reserve lending, I should probably mention for folks who don't know that the fractional reserve lending is actually over now. People don't know this. It's been about 6 weeks. I think it was March 26th. It went into effect where the Federal Reserve changed their own rules. Basically, I think it was the Board of Governors that said, all right, from now on, with like a week or 2 weeks notice, Banks no longer have to keep reserves for customer deposits, commercial deposits, international lending, other bank deposits. So now there is a 0% reserve requirement on all forms of deposits for all United States banks. And that's as of, I think, March 26, 2020. And this was not in the news. This was not, reported on. I've saw very few even YouTubers. I can't think of a single YouTuber except Mike Maloney. Mike Maloney and I were talking about it together offline. I can't remember if he did a video on it, but it's official. We don't have fractional reserve lending. There's no fraction and there's no reserve. Right. So that means legally, banks do not have to keep any money in their vaults anymore. Nothing. So if you go and say, I want to withdraw $100, they could say no, and legally that's okay. And they say, no, it's like, you lent it to us, we're not giving it back. That's totally allowed by law. So this is one of the crazy things that's happening. And the further we go down this rabbit hole, or the further we go in this direction, the greater the opportunity for companies like Ripple and their products to bring banking back to the hands of the people. And once we do that, once we have control over our own money and our own storage and transfer of value, then we can start doing incredible things and bring all kinds of prosperity. We'll solve every health crisis that arises. We'll solve every transportation crisis, food crisis, everything, if we start with sound money and being able to control it in a democratic way. So that is why this whole industry is so exciting to me.
Me too.
It's the foundation. The monetary system is the foundation.
And Alan, have you run across a gentleman named George Gammon?
No, I don't think so.
That if you do yourself a favor and Google George Gammon, again, one of the great joys of my getting involved with putting this channel together and interviewing people and getting to know them is being able to meet people like you. And George lives in Medellin and has done well in his life as an investor. He lives in Medellin now, and he basically, from what I can tell, he buys properties and then, fixes them up and then sells them. And but he does videos about money and economy and all of that kind of stuff. And I've never met a gentleman who enjoys what he's talking about more. I mean, the joy coming out of George Gammon when he's talking about all this stuff is just infectious. And he's a very, very, very smart man. And we had the honor. He was one of the people that we were able to interview with the XRP Army News. And he always does his videos. He always says, I'm going to show this to you in 3 simple steps. And then he goes through everything in 3 simple steps. But if you have never seen him before, you may want to check him out. And if he has not spoken with Mike, getting the two of them together, and you as well as a guest to what you're doing with your YouTube, George is top notch. You'd love him. He's a great guy and a very, very smart guy. I think one of his last interviews was with Robert Kiyosaki. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I was very fortunate to be able to run into George just kind of when he was starting up his channel, and now he's got over 100,000 subscribers. So he's gotten really good at what he's doing. He's just a great guy, but I think you'd like him. Now, one thing that I did want to do, I mentioned to you earlier that I wanted to show you a document. There is a company called Everest, and they're in Japan. And I wanted to share my screen and show that with you. Show that to you real quick. All right. Trying to see if I can get this thing. Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So you see this?
Oh, yeah. I just saw this on Twitter, but I didn't go into it in any kind of depth. Did you tweet this yesterday or something?
Yeah. Okay. And I'll give you a link to it when we're done. Okay. So this was a document that was created by Everest, who is an NTT data company, and they created this in 2017. It's a 14-page document about blockchain technology adoption. And so one of the things that I like is they begin to show us the timeline of technology. And the first mainframe computers came along in the 50s, and then HTTP came along in 93. Then we get companies like eBay, Amazon, Alibaba, Facebook, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. And then we're moving now into the Internet of Value. So now Bitcoin is first invented around 2012. Then there's a company called R3 that has come along, and Ripple was born. And then they created the Interledger Protocol. And then SBI Ripple, SBI is a banking consortium in Japan who is investors in NTT Data and Everest. And one of the owners of NTT Data are the Japanese government. And if you look at the time frame of where they look at how they're going to integrate everything, they've gotten this timeline that they started with all the way through 2030. How they're going to integrate blockchain and what I believe is the new monetary plumbing system of the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And then the biggest part that I wanted to show you, and again, the payment settlement is the big problem that they had. SWIFT needs to be replaced. Slow, dormant capital, high fees, 4-day settlement time. Now, this is the one that page 13 was the one that I wanted to show you. And again, think about this, Alan. This was created in 2017, and you see where we are now. And what they propose to do, Everest and NTT Data, and with cooperation of SBI, is to put together what I believe is a new monetary payment system that the entire world is going to be operating on. There is in our XRP Army world, there's one of our favorite guys, one of the developers with Ripple, is named Evan Schwartz. And he's famous for having been giving a presentation, and somebody asked him, well, what exactly is the potential of what the piece of the pie of the money that Ripple is actually going after? And he kind of paused for a second and kind of laughed. And then he said, all the money. And Alan, this is the reason that Evan Schwartz said all of the money. Because what XRP is set out to do is have their new ILP, their interoperable ledger. And what that means is the bank in China can send Chinese money through the system, and XRP is the bridge asset that carries it through the system, and the interoperable ledger transforms it into money to these companies where the customer is paying the company receiving the funds in their money. Mm-hmm. So in other words, a person in Japan buys something with Amazon, they start with the yuan through the system, and they end up getting paid. Amazon ends up getting paid in dollars.
Right.
Yeah. So, and again, I didn't know if in your crypto experience, if you were aware of, what the plan for Ripple and what the plan for the XRP ledger is, and where all of that kind of fits in, and the companies that are involved and have partnerships that are all involved with this.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. I didn't know the full extent of it, but I know that it's big, and I know that when you hear Brad Garlinghouse talk, he's not a man with small ambitions. Let's put it that way. No. So he's definitely he even looks like a banker, the way he dresses and speaks, and the type of news outlets that he interacts with. He's very he's sort of a good liaison in that sense between the existing financial institution and the disrupting, newcomers. He really bridges that gap nicely, in my opinion, unlike some of the other CEOs of other projects who, they wear T-shirts and flip-flops, and they have strengths in their own ways and so forth, and maybe have brilliant projects and so forth. But it's just something I've observed. It's a notable difference between Ripple and a lot of other companies and coins, by association.
And I don't know how you feel about it, but I believe what the bigger picture again is, Alan. I believe that and who's pulling the strings? The Bilderberg Group. I ran into something last week called the Trilateral Commission. I'd never heard of them before. Have you ever heard of the Trilateral Commission?
Yeah, I've at least heard about a lot of groups and conspiracy theories, but I just don't spend time going down those rabbit holes because
I really don't. I really don't either. But I do. I mean, look, I do understand how the Fed was created. Mm-hmm. It was created, the creature of Jekyll Island. It was created by the wealthy guys, and their plan basically was to control the money. And they wanted, and usury is not supposed to be legal. But if I buy a house and I end up over the 30 years of paying off the mortgage, if I end up paying more in interest than I do than the property was actually worth, that's a usury tax. Sorry about that, but they did it. Yeah. But how else are we going to work it out? I mean, so I believe, I don't know about the Illuminati. I don't know about the Masons, Freemasons. I don't know about any of all that stuff. But I do believe that there are central bankers, a group of people that are going to decide where our new monetary system is going. And Alan, I believe that they want to do two things with that. I believe that they want it to be digital. Mm-hmm. So the unbanked, the underbanked, and everybody in the world can participate in the monetary system. And I think that they want to do that. So they need it to be digital, and they need it to be mobile, accessible on phones. And I think they want to do that so they can track every single transaction that we do.
Yeah.
And as well as I do that one of the knocks on Bitcoin 5 years ago was, there's criminal activity. The criminals can come in and get involved in that. Well, it's directly the opposite. If everything is tracked, and that's why I don't believe that the Cardanos and the Moneros of the world are going to be allowed to go forward and hit mass adoption. The governments are never going to let us privatize things. They want to be able to track every single transaction that we take. And I believe that this is moving us all into a cashless society so they can track everything that we do.
Yeah, I agree with you. And so I have a couple comments on that. I'll say one thing about maybe conspiracies in general, and then I'll address the cashless society more directly. My thought on conspiracies is sort of this. So like if you take away that word for just a minute and think about how the world works. Think about a family, think about a school, think about a company. There's a small group of people that make decisions, and they have some kind of agenda, right? Like parents conspire to raise their children. They may or may not use deception from time to time. And it may be in the best interest of the children, obviously. And, teachers use deception, and administrators work together to accomplish an objective. And, the executive board of a company works together to accomplish an objective. They may or may not deceive the employees from time to time. They may or may not, do this, that, or the other thing. And so I think, if we're going to split the world into two possible scenarios, either one, people work together to accomplish things, or two, they don't, and everything's just random. My goodness, it's people work together. Like, of
Right.
course, you know, like almost everything in the world is a small group of people working together to accomplish something. You know, if a particular goal is evil or not, or if a particular goal is justified, but maybe there are evil means, you know, that's always subjective. That's always going to be subjective. So, you know, I think a lot of people who are interested in conspiracy theories or spend a lot of time on it, or who try to convince others that conspiracies are true, I think they maybe are a little misguided in the sense that, okay, even if your conspiracy is proven correct, or even if you had some reasonable degree of certainty with any conspiracy, then what? Like,
Right.
then what? Okay, suppose you're right. Now what do you do? You know, do you stop it? Do you just kind of accept it? And do you, you know, what do you do with your money? What do you do with your family? Do you relocate? Do you sell your house? So, you know, I would just say for any, like, I'm fascinated by conspiracy theories. I always enjoy hearing them. I don't necessarily entertain them. But my question is always, okay, if it's true, what do I do? If it's false, what do I do? And maybe the answer is the same in both cases. So,
Right.
so that's kind of my thought on conspiracy theories in general. And in terms of a cashless society, yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. If you're in power and you want to stay in power, you want to know what people are doing who have power and who don't have power. And so one way that you watch people, or one way that you surveil people, is to, you know, maintain control over their money. You know, is that a good or a bad thing in general? I have no idea. That's anyone's opinion. Is it a good or bad thing for me personally? It depends. Is it a good or a bad thing for you personally? It depends. One thing I'll say about privacy coins is that a person using Monero or some other privacy coin may find themselves falsely accused of a crime down the road and realize that because there's no paper trail, they can't prove their own innocence.
Right.
That's actually something I don't hear people discussing. That's really powerful. You actually might want an open system, and you can say, here are all my transactions. I didn't do anything wrong.
That's actually the first time that I've ever heard that, and I'd never thought of that about it from that angle. So I'm glad that we got to talk.
Yeah.
If for no other reason than that. Now, one of my all-time favorite YouTubers in our XRP community is a gentleman named, his channel name is The Digital Asset Investor. And he was a financial planner, advisor before. And now he lives in Georgia, and he's a full-time YouTuber basically now. Great guy. And I'm a libertarian. I'm not a Democrat or a Republican. I'm right smack dab in the middle. And so I've got some views about privacy that I don't really like the fact that we're going cashless. I don't really like that from my own personal, viewpoint. But one of the things that DAI has helped me to be able to wrap my head around is that they're doing it anyway. That they're not going to stop and say, wait, we're offending Scott Powell's civil liberties beliefs. We can't do this. That they're not going to do that. They're going to do it anyway. And having said that, is that if I can profit off of it, I'm going to do it. Because I got to be honest with you, Alan, I'm invested in the crypto world. If it goes halfway to where I think it's going to, I'm 58 years old. If it goes to $10, XRP does. If it goes to 20, 100, I'm cashing out. I'm moving back to the mountains of North Carolina. I'm going to get a nice little cabin with a long driveway and a gate. Get me some real good internet and a lot of good TV, and the rest of the world can end up doing what they want to. I mean, that because again, they're going to do this irregardless of what I believe that it violates my rights or not. So if that is true, okay, then we're not going to end up with anarchy. We're not going to end up with everything is private, because they're not the central banks and the governments. the government is going to have a way to be able to track the transactions so they can collect taxes.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to let these privacy tokens be mainstream and be used by everybody. They're just not going to do it. So I have put myself in a position that if I can take advantage of it and I can profit off of it enough to fund the rest of my retirement, then I'm just going to go enjoy the rest of my life and let the freedom fighters fight that good fight all on their own. I'm good.
Yeah. I totally hear you, and I would sort of even take that further in an even more exciting way, in my opinion. Because even if the scenario you just outlined happened, beautiful, right? Totally beautiful for yourself and for anyone else who shares a similar path. I'll do you one better, so to speak. And let's say the fiat system collapses to the point where a dollar, doesn't have value, right? It becomes the toilet paper that it is. And at that point, you can't even price a token like XRP in dollars. It doesn't make sense. I mean, it's like infinity, right? And like, Bitcoin's infinity, XRP's infinity, everything's infinity, because you simply won't want to sell your XRP for dollars, even if it's $10, $20, infinity dollars, whatever. And if and when that happens, I mean, it's inevitable, I think. May take 100 years, but it will happen. When that happens, I have a feeling that the new ecosystem, the new monetary ecosystem, the digital one, that is being created by the private sector and by governments simultaneously,
Right.
It will be set up in such a way that value can be transferred so easily, so quickly, so effortlessly, and so forth. And we will have options for sound money that will be able to build such incredible projects on top of those layers that the standard of living, by staying in those tokens, by continuing to own XRP or Bitcoin or whatever it is, not selling for fiat, but continuing to own them, they have such utility and such value that you want to use them for what they can do, not sell them for a dollar because of what a dollar can do. And so, when you build any economy, any society on sound money and, predictability and free flow of payments and, sound rule of law and so forth, which hopefully we'll get back to sometime soon. But when you have that, it opens the door for companies like Ripple and other innovators and other disruptors to come in and build amazing products that deliver value to the consumer. And so, the standard of living rises to such an amazing extent, beyond what we currently have now with, computers and cell phones and streaming technology and YouTube and all these things that we can bring value to each other and so many people. Imagine that 1,000 times over. The world could be such a beautiful place if we take it back, to be honest. And Swift is a perfect example of a 40-year-old technology. Because there's a government-imposed monopoly, they don't want it to be improved,
right?
And eventually, the private sector will say, "Too bad, we want it to be improved."
Right.
We want better for ourselves, and so I don't know where things will shake out in terms of privacy coins and government coins and surveillance coins, so to speak. All of them will exist. Which one's going to be a larger one than another? Who knows? And some people will choose not to use certain things, but it's really all going to exist. And there's going to be amazing products and services built on top of everything. And I'm just excited to see where it goes.
Me too. And one thing that does bother me though, about Bitcoin, and again, I'm not a XRP maximalist. I own Bitcoin. I hope it goes to $100,000 of Bitcoin. But one of the things that does pose a problem for me with it now is that the hash rate now is 52% in China. And if they wanted to, they can pretty much control it. And then the other thing is there, up until the present time, there has been no utility. It's just a store of value. Now, it's the best over the last 10 years and you're more of a financial guy than me, but I don't think there's another asset on the planet that is appreciated from 8 cents or 2 cents, what it was 10 or 12 years ago, to over $9,000. I don't see any stock, anything that has gone anywhere near that at all, period. So it's been the best performing asset in the history in the last 10 years. I'm happy about that. However, I can't do anything with it. If I wanted, the transaction time is slow. The fees are high. The Chinese now have got 52% of the hash rate. I mean, and to the Bitcoin maximalist, and there are a lot of them out there that just bash Ripple and XRP because they're the banker coin. Well, I mean, the fiat system is the problem, not the other crypto. But hey, I got news for you, Tone Vase and Mr. Pompliano and the Winklevoss twins. I got news for you. I'm not trying to be a bad guy about it. I own Bitcoin, but there's some serious problems with it right now. So,
yeah, I definitely get where you're coming from, and maybe I'll address the opinionated nature of a lot of participants in the Bitcoin ecosystem. You know, I see it everywhere. I see it with every coin. I see it with Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, everything, where you have just, you know, either maximalists or people that, maybe I should say, like, superiorists. You know, they just think theirs is better than the others.
yep.
It's everywhere. It's in every ecosystem. And I think that's unhealthy. You know, I think that's unhealthy for each coin. It's unhealthy for crypto in general. Although, you know, I try to look at both sides of things. The one healthy takeaway that I see is that, you know what, it keeps a lot of people out of crypto that maybe probably shouldn't be in there yet. For example, J.K. Rowling, if you saw on Twitter, you know, the last few days, she was asking about Bitcoin, and a lot of people were like, let me help you buy it. You got to get in. It's the greatest thing. And other people, this coin's better. That coin's better. And I think it kind of scared her away. And that might be a good thing, because you don't want a lot of people coming in who are extremely non-technical, who are non-financial, who are not related to any of this, because they're going to get hurt, you know, big time. And potentially they could get hurt in such a way that they never come back. And that doesn't help. So, you know, as much as I don't like all the angst and the, you know, my coin is better than your coin, it weirdly might be helping the ecosystem in the long run, even though I don't enjoy it. Every time I see a tweet or a post or a video that's all, you know, angry, you know, I just sigh. Come on, another one of these? Like, take a breath, man. Like, you know. So anyways, I try to look at both sides. I try to look at the pros and cons to everything, and you know, all the, you know, these coins, Bitcoin and XRP, they're both going to be around. Like, they're going to be around. Which one's bigger or not? I don't know. They are a completely different use case. They don't compete with each other. And,
Correct.
And here's the thing: like, a lot of younger people are in cryptocurrency. You know, guys in their 20s, let's say. Awesome, amazing. And what the comparison I'll make with cryptocurrencies is the same I'll make to the stock market. You know, just because a stock is listed on a public exchange doesn't mean it competes with other stocks. Like, you know, like Walmart doesn't compete with Boeing. They don't, you know, it's like, you know, and McDonald's doesn't compete with. And, you know, there's cryptocurrencies, but they're not competing. So Bitcoin and Ripple and XRP are they're not competing. So, anyways, there was something else.
Alan, it seems to me like, too, if the ledger, the plumbing that it's all being run on, if I understand it correctly, and again, you come from more of a financial background than I do, but if the ledger is inoperable, can't I pay with Bitcoin and they receive it in XRP? I mean, and if XRP is used as a bridge currency, then XRP is still in the background. But I think if the ledger is interoperable, then that means we can spend whatever crypto that we like. I mean, I think that's a great thing. And I just don't, and I got to be honest with you, I hear it more. And again, I'm neutral. I'm okay with Bitcoin. I'm okay with XRP. I own more XRP because I feel like that, again, there's a substantial company behind it. They've got a use case with MoneyGram. They are saving money where they're using XRP and RippleNet. They're saving money over what a customer could use if they went with Western Union. The transfer fees are cheaper. I mean, it's quicker, it's immediate. I mean, it's working. Now they're expanding the payment corridors over into Thailand. So I can see that there is a solid use case that as they begin to expand it, I think it's going to make more sense. But I know, I realize XRP Army News. I'm an XRP guy. I get it, but I'm hoping at least maybe not everybody is going to believe me, but I'm not negative Bitcoin. I'm just trying to say that I do see more of the venom, and I do see more of the maxi attitude coming from people in the Bitcoin community. Tone Vays and the Winklevoss twins are two reasons. Why in the world wouldn't Gemini want to have the third largest crypto on their exchange? I mean, because and again, they own a whole lot of Bitcoin and they're invested heavily in it being successful. Okay, but I don't see where being negative to XRP helps make your case. I just don't get it.
It's tough, and that's where we can put our conspiracy hat on and say, like, what is their conspiracy? Because it's something, but it might be a benevolent one, it might be a malevolent one, it might be good natured or bad natured, and maybe some people would say a conspiracy is evil by definition. Okay, fine. So then the question becomes, what are they trying to do? Are they just trying to profit for themselves? Are they just trying, because of their individual Bitcoin holdings? Are they just trying to profit for Gemini as a company and an exchange? Are they doing something else looking towards the future? My guess is a combination of all three. So, in terms of their decision to not list XRP, I really don't know. But I should go back and address your legitimate criticisms of Bitcoin, which were twofold. One, China owns a majority of the hashing power. Yeah, definitely. And then the other is you can't do anything with Bitcoin. It just sits there, which is for the most part true. And I think it will continue to be true despite what a lot of Bitcoin proponents would argue. So in terms of the hash rate being in China, yeah, that's it's not ideal, I guess is how I would phrase it. And it certainly wasn't Satoshi's intention. And it may not even have been anticipated as a possible result of game theory that may have been overlooked. I mean, obviously you can't think of everything.
Right.
So the question there is, how big of a risk is that? Really hard to say. I mean, nobody knows the answer, despite the amount of confidence people will speak with. Nobody knows the answer. The way I look at it is the incentives of doing a 51% attack are short-term profit. You can do double spends and that sort of thing. But then in the long term, hard to say what that is. I mean, it could be a matter of hours. It could be longer. In the long term, you sort of destroy the network. You destroy the value of the network. You destroy confidence. You destroy that. So let's say you only get to double spend a little bit. What does that mean? I don't know. It could be $1 billion. It could be 10 billion. Hard to say. That's obviously great. That's enough to retire to a cabin in the woods. You know what I mean? Like it's with a great internet connection and whatever else you need, right? It's obviously enough, so to speak.
Right.
So it's hard to say, like, if these miners have a short-term time horizon or a long-term time horizon. I'm guessing that if you're mining Bitcoin, you have a long-term perspective. It's sort of my guess. However, in the long term, the composition of miners will change. So maybe in the long term, you start to get miners with a short-term perspective. That's possible. So I really don't know. But at this point, for me personally, it's a risk I'm willing to take. And that's why I only invest what I can afford to lose. Right. If Bitcoin goes to zero.
And I guess, Alan, the part of it for me is when we're taking a look at the potential of mass adoption. and government regulations. And I just don't see how Trump is going to be Bitcoin friendly when someone lets him know that that the hash rate 52% in China. I think for Trump, I just don't. I mean, I don't see how he is going to get around that. As far as USA, government regulations and all of that. And again, I don't think Satoshi, who showed up yesterday, let out some Bitcoin, bought a lot, released some or sold some from a wallet. That was pretty interesting. Again, I agree with you. I don't think that was Satoshi's intention. I don't, but it's the reality now. And I can just imagine some of the Bitcoin maxis that have just bashed XRP. If 52% of the escrow of what Ripple owns in XRP was controlled by the Chinese government, I mean, they would be relentless saying that now the banker coin is owned mainly by China. I mean, again, I'm not negative about it. I still own it. I would love it if it went up to 100 grand, but it's a legitimate problem.
Yeah, it is. It's tough. For now, my personal view is I'm sort of hoping, I definitely need to think more about it and imagine that I were in their shoes of an individual miner or maybe someone in the CCP, Chinese Communist Party, the government, and think, okay, assuming it's power above all else, of a very close relative of power is money. And and then there's sort of a ripple effect, no pun intended, but a ripple effect of other, types of power and things you can do there. I'd really want to think a lot more about it before I expressed it with any degree of confidence. Some of these things I'll sit and think for hours and hours and hours, day after day after day. Just turn off Twitter, turn off the computer, stare out the window. I actually live in a cabin in the woods, by the way. So I just look out at the trees or whatever it is, and just really think, if I were in their shoes, what would I do? Why? How could I profit? Is it a short-term profit, a long-term profit, etc.? So the way I'm thinking about it now, without a whole lot of effort, is I'm sort of hoping and relying on the incentives to play nice is probably going to be more profitable for these miners than to collude and try to attack the network. That's sort of my guess. Also, one thing people aren't discussing, which is a very real possibility, is that a 51% attack can happen regardless of geography. So it could be the case that there's only one miner in China that has 20% of the network colluding with a United States miner that has 35% of the network, and combined they have more than 51%. And it's those types of attacks could blindside people because they're maybe not thinking about or talking about, cross-border collusion. Maybe, we still think in terms of countries,
I think that the biggest fear is that the Chinese government would just go take they would just go take all the mining facilities and take it over as the government running it, and take it from the Chinese citizens who are doing it now. I think that to me is the biggest fear. Yeah,
I agree. And that's actually most plausible. I think that's the most likely outcome of the other ones we've kind of brainstormed here, because it's in the CCP interest to destroy Bitcoin.
Dominate the world.
Dominate the world, exactly. And Bitcoin is a humongous threat. No, really, Bitcoin is a humongous threat to that. And so I don't think it matters from their perspective if they can double spend and get $1 billion or 10 billion. It doesn't matter. They need the network down. And in the long term benefits of consolidating and maintaining and growing their own power are worth way more than billions. You can't measure it in billions. You got to use a bigger number. But here's the beautiful thing about Bitcoin and all of these technologies is that even if the Bitcoin network gets attacked or disappears, let's say, it's kind of hard to imagine it disappearing entirely now that we've seen what happened with Mt. Gox and the intraday trading that dropped all the way to a penny and still didn't die. Bitcoin didn't go to zero. It hit a penny and then rebounded, which is crazy. If folks don't know, there's like a video of it happening like in real time somewhere on the internet. I watched months ago. Someone just recorded his own trading screen. So I don't know if it was just amazing. You can see the price drop, hit a penny, and then bounce back up, and it's just really amazing. And when you kind of like experience the emotions of doing it, you're like, wow, Bitcoin's actually more resilient than I thought.
Oh yeah.
So anyways, I think even if Bitcoin is 51% attacked and a lot of the value, measured in fiat gets destroyed, that's obviously tragic, and it's not good from like an investor's point of view. But I think the network will survive. It may require a soft fork, a hard fork, something like that. But the idea of Bitcoin will be preserved. It may get a new name, but this idea of a store of value, right? A thing that is just a store of value, there's always going to be one of those. And in the physical world, it's been gold forever. And I think moving forward, I think it'll be Bitcoin forever, even if the nature of it changes. And I think the changes will be relatively small tweaks, actually. If you look at all the hard forks that have either been proposed and failed, like Bitcoin Unlimited, Bitcoin Classic, and then, obviously like new coins, all the new coins, Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin SV, love them or hate them, they haven't surpassed the original.
Right. Correct.
All these sort of never succeeded. So it still continues to be the case that the first one was the best. And the longer that continues, the more likely it is to continue, which is the Lindy effect. It's like,
and again, I hope I didn't come across and have you feel like that you're the Bitcoin defender in the conversation, because again, I own Bitcoin. Yeah. I hope it goes to 100,000. I just don't understand the Bitcoin maxis who tend to be super negative about other stuff. That was really kind of the main point of what I was trying to bring up.
Yeah, I definitely don't mean to defend Bitcoin against your attacks, because I don't perceive them as attacks at all.
Good.
But I know, but I know there are attacks out there, and I like to be a voice of reason whenever possible.
Me too.
Yeah, definitely, and I appreciate that, and I think the world can use as much of it as it can handle. Let's a lot more. Let's say.
Yeah, and believe it or not, Alan, one of the guys that has been real negative has been a guy named Tone Vase, and I actually one of my favorite crypto YouTubers is Sam I Am. His channel is called To the Lifeboats. If you haven't seen anything by Sam, brilliant guy. And I, in Twitter, offered to put together a charity event where if the two of them were willing to get together and have a frank, honest discussion about things. Because when you've got a guy that is just bashing Ripple and clearly does not even understand the difference between Ripple, the company, and XRP, the digital asset, doesn't even understand that, but is bashing it. Mm-hmm. I mean, MoneyGram is not stupid. Whether you like Ripple and XRP or not, MoneyGram is not stupid. They're in a partnership and things are working well in that partnership. There's an exchange called Bitso that it started out with 5% of the remittance business in Mexico utilizing XRP and RippleNet. Then they grew to 8%. By the end of the year, they're looking to have 10% of the remittance business in Mexico. I mean, whether you like it or you don't, it's working. It's cheaper. It's faster. I mean, more secure. I mean,
yeah.
Like I said, I just don't. I think that you have a very weak pimp hand when all you can do is try to knock something else down to try to make what you have look good. Because again, and the complete insanity of it is a point you made earlier. They don't even compete with each other.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yep.
Why do I want to say McDonald's is bad if I work at Lowe's or Home Depot?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's interesting. Again, I try to look at both sides of things, and I see those people like Tone Vays and the other Bitcoin maximalists who they hate on other coins like XRP, and I try to look at that as what, maybe as an XRP holder, it's a blessing in disguise because they're keeping the price down for you so you can buy more. You know what I mean? And you gotta love the haters, because if you've actually got a good product or service and you have conviction with what you're going to do, you will eventually succeed despite what people say along the way. And so it can be really hard to love the haters. But if Ripple ultimately succeeds in this goal, and it's already the #1 at what it's trying to do. I mean, I don't even know if Ripple has a competitor with a head on its shoulders. I mean, because all the legacy payment systems that I'm aware of are garbage. So Ripple is, to the best of my knowledge, it's destroying the existing industry without any competition from other destroyers.
But the holdup though is like Western Union and SWIFT wanting to hold on and not go ahead and go with the better, quicker, cheaper technology that the legacy system wants to hold on. I mean, and again, look, when we were in the cassette world and the CD was presented to us, the CD's better.
Yeah.
I mean, so
yeah, time will tell. But Brad Garlinghouse and team have demonstrated an ability to make partnerships, and like you said, some big banking families are involved on the board, and there's a lot of upside potential there. There's a lot of upside potential, and it's not just pie in the sky. It's a continuation of what's already been done. Which so in that sense, the hardest part is actually in the past. It's just a matter of sustaining the momentum, and that's definitely possible. So we'll see. And the good news is, if Ripple ultimately succeeds and XRP ultimately is a very valuable commodity, let's say, or currency, or whatever we want to call it, token, then all of the haters today, the people hating on XRP, either will be proven wrong, or they'll eventually come to realize that they were wrong, and they'll buy in at way too high a price. When you're looking to sell, so it really, it's frustrating for me to see all the hate, regardless of what it's directed towards. It's definitely frustrating for me. But whenever I can, I try to say, what, how can I turn this hate into a positive?
Me too. I mean, again, to me, the central bankers are the ones that I don't even dislike Jerome Powell. I don't dislike Mnuchin. But having said that, when I sit there and watch them say what they're saying, I know they don't believe this stuff. There's no way in the world. They have to say the party line to be able to try and keep the confidence up. I get it. I mean, what are they really going to do? Are they really going to get on there and say, hey, we've let this thing get out of hand so bad that we're $147 trillion in unfunded liabilities. We're screwed. I mean, Jerome Powell cannot say that. Yeah. Because confidence is such a big part of having the value in the currency. I get that. But it is comical to watch them talk and to know that I've educated myself well enough that if I could sit down and have a frank, honest discussion with them, there ain't no way that they'd be getting that in a real conversation with somebody who understands better what's going on. They're saying that for the uninformed and the ones not interested in looking at this close enough, because the banking system is in trouble. The one thing that I would compliment Mr. Mnuchin on the most is marrying up. That there may never be in the history of mankind a gentleman who has pulled off the marrying above where he should have married better than Steve Mnuchin. Thank you very much.
Yeah, exactly. I definitely agree with you though about their rhetoric and their reasoning and my attitude towards them. I mean, I don't know who these guys are, off camera, let's say, and I don't know what their history was like growing up. I don't know what they were like as teenagers. I don't know if they're, good guys or bad guys, so to speak. I believe that they're in bad systems, but I wouldn't necessarily blame them for where they're at because I don't know how they got there,
Right.
And I don't know if it was sort of an accident. And, I definitely believe that there are very well-intentioned people that sort of work hard and climb the ranks in whatever organization, and then only to realize that, oh my goodness, this organization is not what I thought it was. There's an agenda here that I don't approve of. There's values that are certainly not mine, and it's hard to sort of let go of that, maybe to just to resign and sort of admit that the last 30 years of your career was sort of wasted, or it was for something that was not the path you thought it was. It's really hard to do that. And Mnuchin and Powell, I have no idea where they came from or what they do in their free time, but I know what they say, and I know it's total garbage, and I know why they're saying it. They sort of have to say they got to keep up. They got to keep up the show.
Yep.
Until it falls apart under its own accord. So I get that, and again, it goes back to, all right, let's say we've figured out the conspiracy. We figured out what the Federal Reserve does. We figured out, what the Treasury does. Now, what do we do, right? What do we do about it? Okay, we start using sound money for ourselves, and if we want to know, what's coming next, right? The best way to predict the future is to invent it.
Right.
So
very good.
Love that. So, like, if you're not building something, if you're not a technological person, you figure it out. Like, start figuring it out, figuring out what those technical people do, or figure out how you can help create a platform like a YouTube channel or a whatever to give those designers and builders a voice, so that we can build the future together. That's what I think.
Well, I would like to thank you again. I'd like to wrap up with two things. One, have you, since you mentioned the sad look on their face if they had to recognize, the failure. Have you ever seen a PBS documentary called The Warning?
The Warning? I don't think so.
Google that.
Okay.
It is the story about a woman who should be having a bronze statue in Washington, D.C. raised to her, and every American ought to go by and thank it every single day. Her name was Brooksley Bourne. Does that name ring a bell at all?
No. Wow. Interesting.
She was a Stanford educated lawyer, and she was in charge when Greenspan and Larry Summers and Mr. Rubin were involved. And her job was to look at Wall Street and see if there was anything going on in a nefarious fashion with the derivative market.
Oh, man.
And she said to Mr. Greenspan and to Mr. Summers and to Mr. Rubin, Houston, we got a big old problem. And they fired her for saying it. And 2 weeks later, Bear Stearns went belly up.
Oh, man.
So if you get a chance, it was a PBS documentary called The Warning. And if you Google it, you can watch it. It's very well produced, very good quality production, and a hell of a story. And that woman is a hero, and they fired her. She tried to tell them. And the reason I brought that up is because at the end of that documentary, they showed Greenspan talking to Congress or the Senate after everything fell apart. And the guy looked like he was about 8,000 years old and completely defeated at the end after everything had collapsed. And then the last thing is, do you feel like that, we'll wrap up with this. Do you feel like that Judy Shelton is going to be nominated positively into the Fed, and as a person who seems to be very gold standardish, do you feel like it would be a positive move for America if Ms. Shelton gets her position at the Fed?
That's a great question. I don't really know, and there's something. The nature of politics is that nothing is ever what it seems, and so despite what we hear in the news and public opinions and so forth, it's really hard to know what's going on behind the scenes. It's really hard to know who has the influence, regardless of formal titles and positions. It's just really hard to know. So I'm not really sure about her fate. In terms of the gold standard itself, as much as I would like a gold standard, it would be really bad for the United States right now because we don't have any gold. And, allegedly we have, I forget the numbers now. Mike Maloney and I were just looking at this. Something like 250 million ounces or something that the Treasury owns. However, about 99% of that is essentially loaned out to the Federal Reserve in the form of gold certificates. So the Federal Reserve, a private entity, has a claim on 90-something% of the gold in the U.S. Treasury.
That's a problem.
It's a huge problem because the U.S. doesn't really have any gold. It's something like 4 million ounces. It's so tiny that if we went onto a gold standard right now, we couldn't. I mean, gold, $1 million.
In your YouTube experience, surfing YouTube and looking at people, have you ever run across a gentleman named Bix Weir? Hit a little freeze up. Oh. There we go. Okay. I can see you. Okay. Have you ever run across a gentleman named Bix Weir?
Bix Weir, yes. Yes, I know that name. Why does that name sound familiar?
Road to Ruta.
Okay, Road to Ruta. Yes. Kind of anarchist.
All right, number one, very interesting comic book that they put out, the Boston Fed. I don't know where the hell that came from. But if you listen to Sir Bix, and again, I love that guy. But another guy that will not say anything about XRP because, he likes to think it's the banker's coin. But he thinks, and again, what do I know? But he's convinced that we've got a humongous amount of gold in the Grand Canyon.
Yeah,
it's part of the Road to Ruta theory.
Oh, okay.
That there is gold that there is gold, and that we're going to end up going through this flop. And Bix actually believes that Alan Greenspan is Satoshi Nakamoto, and he put it all together because he failed us with going off the gold standard and leaving the free market open and allowing the derivative market to go where it went. And that was Alan Greenspan's payback to the world, was to get them moving into the digital currency world. So,
geez, I mean, maybe I've never heard that.
Well, Bix is a very smart guy, and again, if you look at that Road to Ruta comic book, have you seen that?
Not the comic book, no.
Yeah, well, you can Google it. Road to Ruta comic book, Boston Federal Reserve. Okay. And it comes right up, and it's the most bizarre thing. And they wrote it in 2007 and or 2008, I think. And in the sand, I think it's on page 14. A year before 9/11, Alan. A year before 9/11, written in the sand in this comic book, written by the Boston Fed, is 9/11/11. And you know what happened at 11 o'clock on 9/11? The Fed, not the planes flying in, that happened at 8 o'clock.
Okay.
At 11 o'clock, the Fed infused $500 billion into our monetary system. And had that not happened, we would have had a complete financial collapse. And it was in a comic book that the Boston Fed, now I know, conspiracy theories are one thing. I get all that. But dude, it's in a comic book written by the Boston Fed.
Yeah.
I mean, what and where did that come from? So it's not just some crazy guy that, like, I love Bix, but it's not like he wrote the comic book.
Right. Yeah.
Somebody at the Boston Fed did it, and I think it's in the teacher's manual, in the sand, 9/11/11. And right then at 11 o'clock is when they put money into the Fed because of the panic, the economic panic that the planes flying into the buildings brought about. I mean,
it's
crazy.
it's so crazy. The that's called predictive programming, where something is written down or illustrated in like a permanent format that then comes to be true.
Yep.
And there's so many examples of it, and there's a lot in the Simpsons and in Family Guy, and to the listeners who have never explored that, do some Google searching and predictive programming of cartoons and different shows, and it's really strange how many like bizarre, I think South Park actually has some as well, how many like out there plot lines, you'd say like, geez, why is this celebrity in this episode, like Kobe Bryant dying in a helicopter crash, and then he actually did in real life, and it's like, what? Like,
I know in the XRP community, there's a lot of Simpson followers believing that there's XRP and Ripple clues in the Simpsons too. So I get it.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, Alan, like I said, I think if you look up that comic book and you look up Bix does a really good explanation of it, and I mean the name of his YouTube channel is Road to Ruta, which was the name of the comic book. But I think you may find that fascinating. Well, I want to deeply appreciate the wide-ranging conversation that we had and your willingness to give me the chance to be able to get to know who you are better and kick around some of these ideas. And it was deeply, deeply appreciative that you were willing to have a conversation with me. I enjoyed it very much.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. This was awesome. I really appreciate the invite, and I wish you a lot of success on your journey.
Well, same to you, and you take care.
Thank you. Thanks, Scott.
All right. See you, Alan. Bye.